Good morning and welcome to today's Friends Life Care Wellness webinar, Your Money and Your Mind, presented by Certified Financial Planner Russ Weiss. My name is Gail Tamarchio. Sorry, I forgot to turn my camera on. And I am Friends Life Care Director of Wellness Initiatives, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to just go over a few housekeeping tips just to ensure you know how to fully participate. The email that you received this morning with the link for you to join the webinar also contained a link to today's handout. So if you weren't able to open the link, no worries at all. The handouts are also in the attendee interface. You can just download those anytime you like to during the presentation. And then here's a screenshot that shows an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own screen in the upper right corner. I know on my tablet it's on the top right of my screen. And you are listening in on your computer speaker system by default. And if you would rather listen by phone, all you have to do is just click on the phone button, and the number is there for you to see. And I think it's also on the attendee interface, so you can call in anytime you like. You also see the question box there, and you can type in questions or comments anytime you like during the webinar. Russ is going to stop maybe once, maybe twice during the webinar to ask questions, but he will answer all questions before the webinar is over. So please be sure to put in any questions that you have, but he might get to your question before the end of the webinar. So, and during the webinar, he's also going to ask you to complete a few polls. All you have to do is just click on the answer and hit submit, and we will see your answer. So now, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Russ Weiss. He's a graduate of Penn State University with a Bachelor of Science in Finance, Portfolio Management, and Security Analysis. He spent the last 20 years with Marshall Financial Group, which is a boutique wealth management firm in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. So as a certified financial planner since 2003, Russ has helped clients and their families, many of whom have unique situations, understand and manage their money to successfully transition through life. Russ is currently enrolled in the Golden Gate University's Master's in Advanced Financial Planning with a concentration in life planning. He participates on Marshall's leadership team as Chief Planning Officer and is a regional board member for the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors. Sounds like you're a very busy guy, Russ. We appreciate you taking the time to meet with us and share your expertise today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Gail. Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me into your home and offices, excuse me, for the next hour. As Gail mentioned, I've worked as a personal wealth advisor for the last 20 years. And as my career has evolved, it's become apparent that successfully building wealth had much more to do with behavior management than investment prowess. I learned that short-term shocks or impacts on investment markets are always different, but our reaction, our behavior is pretty much always the same: fear and greed. An example is recently during COVID, I had a client of mine, rather wealthy individual, probably close to $9 or $10 million, most of it in cash already, wanted to get out of the equity side of his positions. And talking it through with him, he was really fearful of what was going to be happening. It was certainly an uncertain time. Well, that was in March or April, and then fast forward to May when things were starting to look a little better. He calls me up and he wants to get back into the market when we talked about not really getting back in until the summer or even the fall. And as I talked through it with him, I kind of asked him, what's leading to this decision? You know, you don't spend that much money. You have a lot of wealth. We can achieve all your goals. Like, what's prompting you to want to do this now? He said, greed. So it's really interesting. He displayed both levels of behavior that most investors show: fear and greed. My goal today is to provide you with my perspective on how we relate to money. And I got to apologize in advance for any disruptions that may occur. I have 2 dogs that live with me, and they don't necessarily abide by our work from home guidelines. So for today's agenda, we'll start with some basic information on the Secure Act, CARES Act, and IRAs. From this, I hope to give you something more tangible to walk away with. And then the majority of the presentation will focus on how our behavioral tendencies and perceptions influence our money decisions. We'll talk through a little bit about understanding risk and our relationship with money. As Gail mentioned, there are 2 short videos and 4 live polls, and I very much appreciate your participation in them. And then after the about 10 minutes into the presentation, I'll give an opportunity for you to ask questions relative to the Secure Act, CARES Act, and the IRAs. And then at the end, there'll be more time to ask questions about the rest of the presentation. So starting with the Secure Act, this was signed into law on December of 20th, 2019, and it went into effect on January 1st, 2020. The Secure Act had an impact on college savings plans, employee-based retirement plans, and individual retirement accounts. Excuse me, Gail, I think maybe, could you mute yourself maybe? Thank you. But we'll spend most of the time on, this presentation is on individual retirement accounts relative to the Secure Act, because my assumption is most of the demographic watching today is impacted mostly by that. So the Secure Act impacted traditional IRAs in several ways. One is change the beginning date for when you have to take required minimum distributions to age 72. So if you didn't turn 70 and a half by January 1st of 2020, then you don't have to take required minimum distributions until you're age 72. If by 12/31/2019 you turn 70 and a half, then you still have to follow the old rules. Besides that, it also removed the age restriction for IRA contributions. So even if you're taking distributions from an IRA, as long as you have earned income and are making money from something work-related, you can make contributions back into an IRA even after age 70. That's a new part of the law. And then finally, yes.
I'm sorry, we can't see your screen. Can you accept the screen?
Yes, I apologize.
No problem, thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, the qualified charitable distribution rule remains in place to make donations from an IRA. You can start doing that after age 70 and a half. And that's where I'd like to kind of focus on the Secure Act. There are one or two the planning tech ideas that you might be able to utilize in your own lives. So focusing on the qualified charitable distributions, today, because of the tax laws that were put into place in 2018, a married couple over age 65 has a standard deduction now of $27,400. That's what it's projected for 2020. And if your itemized deductions are less than that amount, and itemized deductions consisting of mortgage interest, real estate, state income taxes, which are capped at $10,000, and medical expenses that are above 7.5% of what's called adjusted gross income, which is line 8B on your 1040. If those add up to less than $27,400, then you may be better off making a donation to charity from an IRA instead of paying it out of a checking or savings account with already taxed money. So using a little bit of a case study here, we have someone, Jim, who's 73 years old and married. Jim has a $300,000 IRA account, and Jim and his wife will report about $200,000 of total income. Part of the income is Jim's IRA distribution of about $11,000. And during the year, Jim is thinking about making an $8,000 donation to charity. Jim currently has about $20,000 in itemized deductions, not including the donation. So between a combination of mortgage interest, medical expenses, and or his state and real estate income and real estate taxes. So here, if we take a look at this, starting with the tax impact if Jim were to take the standard deduction. So as I mentioned earlier, Jim has about $200,000 of total income, of which about $189,000 is made up of maybe Social Security income, pensions, other income, maybe from work, and then added to his $11,000 IRA required distribution for a total of $200,000. And if Jim were to make a donation to the charity from his IRA, and when this is done, you have to, the check or the distribution has to be payable to the charity directly. It can't be paid to you, and then you deposit it in your account and make the donation to the charity. You can get the check sent to your address of record, but the payee has to be the charity in order for it to be considered a qualified distribution. And by doing that, not only does it count towards Jim's required minimum distribution, that $8,000, but it also offsets the total $11,000. So in this case, Jim would only have $3,000 of taxable income. He has an $11,000 charitable or $11,000 required minimum distribution. $8,000 of it went to the charity, leaving only $3,000 of taxable income. So Jim's total gross taxable income is $192,000. The $3,000 from the IRA and $189,000 of other. No, so Jim's looking at, well, what should I take? The standard deduction of $27,400 or my itemized deductions? Well, obviously, given his standard deductions higher at $27,400, he's going to take that, and it leaves him with a taxable income of $164,600, or about $27,900 of tax due. So if we compare that over here to where Jim makes the donation directly to the charity from his bank account or a savings or checking account and not from the IRA, you see we have the same total income, $189,000 plus the $11,000 of required minimum distribution. But he has a gross taxable income of $200 because it's not offset by the $8 that would have gone to charity. And now Jim's looking at, should I take itemized deductions or my standard deduction? Well, his itemized deductions are $20,000 plus the $8,000 that he paid to the charity. So it's $28,000 of itemized deductions. His standard deduction is $27,400, so he's going to itemize. But he's really only getting a small benefit. The $8,000 donation doesn't really help him that much because the standard deduction is so high to overcome. It ends up that Jim has taxable income of $172,000, and the tax impact is $29,600. So he ends up actually paying $1,700 more in tax by having made the donation to the charity from his checking or savings account, as opposed to making the donation from his IRA directly. Moving on to inherited IRAs, the other thing the Secure Act impacted. When someone inherits an IRA under the old rules, they were allowed to take the distributions over their lifetime or their life expectancy. Well, that was changed where now anybody who inherits an IRA has to fully distribute the IRA within 10 years, unless you meet one of the following beneficiary exemptions: surviving spouse, a disabled person, chronically ill person, a minor child, someone who has not reached age 21 yet, at which point the 10-year rule would begin after they reach 21, and someone fewer than 10 years younger than the original IRA owner. So theoretically, if you had someone who was 65 and they had a brother who was 60 and they left the IRA to the brother, since he's less than 10 years younger, the brother could essentially take the distributions over his own lifetime instead of paying it out over 10 years. Now, something to keep in mind in reference to this 10-year payout, it doesn't have to be systematic. You just have to empty the account within 10 years. So you could pay it all out in year 1, you could pay it all out in year 3, or you could wait till year 10 and pay it all out, or you can take it equally from every year. It's really up to you, but bottom line, all the money has to come out of the IRA by year 10. So what are some beneficiary strategies to consider? Well, one is, if you are a beneficiary of an IRA, you want to think about being purposeful about the distributions. because there is no system in place other than having to empty the account within 10 years. You want to be cognizant of your other income. So if you are someone who maybe lost your job, or you had a reduction in pay, or maybe you own a small business that has a business loss, you want to try and be purposeful on when you take those distributions. If you don't have those options, then your probably best bet is to just take it a little bit over time and try and equal out the tax impact, as opposed to waiting till the end and taking it all out in 1 year. As it relates to people who own IRAs and are thinking about who should I name as my beneficiary, skipping a generation might make some sense. So if you're a grandparent that has grandchildren that are minors, you might think about leaving some of the IRA to them, because if they're 9, 10, 11 years old, granted, that's a lot of money to leave someone that age, but they'll be able to take payments over a long time period, because from age 11 to age 21, the payouts are based on their life expectancy. And then once they get to age 21, they then have another 10 years to take out the rest of the money. A third possibility is if you're philanthropically inclined, you might consider naming the charity as the beneficiary of your IRA. And one thing we do here typically with some of our clients is we will set up a separate IRA under the person's name and move over to the other IRA an amount that the client wants to donate to charity. And then once it's in that other IRA, we'll name the charity 100% beneficiary. That way you don't end up having confusion over how much money might be going to the charity if it's a percentage based on having other beneficiaries as part of that same IRA. CARES Act. So this came into place. It's the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. That came into place in March of 2020, and it had an impact on small business, the unemployed, and IRAs also, although its impact on IRAs was a little less. Under this act, there are no 2020 required minimum distributions for this year, and this applies to traditional and inherited IRAs. So and the benefit of this is you don't have to pay the tax this year if you don't need the money. And another part of that particular act is they said if you've already taken the distribution in 2020 prior to March, you can pay it back into the IRA by August 31st and avoid paying tax on any of that money. So I'm going to take a small break here and see if there's any questions relative to the Secure Act, CARES Act, and IRAs.
Okay, so somebody asked, would you please explain the beginning date change again? I think that was for the Secures Act.
The beginning date, yes. So the best way to look at it is it's a weird rule. Under the old rules, they said you didn't have to start an IRA distribution until you turned age 70 and a half. And so if somebody somebody's birthday was June 15th, or excuse me, somebody's birthday was January 15th of 2019, they turned 70 and a half by July 15th of 2019. So they were obligated to take a distribution in 2019, not on the day they turned 70 and a half, just during that year. They have to do it by the end of the year of 12/31. So if you didn't turn 70 and a half by 12/31/2019, in other words, if your birthday was anytime after July 1st of 2019, you wouldn't be 70 and a half until January of 2020, which means you fall under the new rules, and you don't have to start required minimum distributions till age 72. Did I answer the question for that person?
It sounded, I haven't gotten anything else from them, so I think so. So
okay.
I think that was it.
It's a little confusing. It's just that 70 and a half aspect kind of messes people up. But bottom line, if your birthday was after July 1st in 2019, if you turn 70 after July 1st, 2019, you fall under the new rules for January 2020.
Oh, thank you. I think that's very clear. And I just wanted to say, somebody had a question about trying to print out what was on the screen, and I just wanted to say all your slides are on the handout. So the handout's on the attendee interface, and it should also be in the link so people could have that. And also, because here's another question for you with regard to the Secures Act. If an IRA was inherited before the act, do the old rules still apply or the new rules?
Yes, thank you for that question. I meant to mention that. Yes, you are under the old rules, so you still get to take the distributions over your lifetime if you inherited the IRA before 12/31/2019.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And then someone asked, if we don't take the required minimum, I think they meant distribution in 2020, will we have to take a double distribution the following year?
No, you will not. It's kind of it's a freebie, so to speak.
Oh, great. Okay.
And there's still a little bit of uncertainty about how they'll determine what divisor you use to determine distributions in 2021. The assumption is they'll just skip all of 2020, and you're now a year older in 2021, so you'll take the 12/31/2020 balance and divide it by your age and the life expectancy factor of 2021, and to come up with what you have to pay out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Someone else asked, if you took a distribution before this act went into effect, but it went to a charity, would you recommend repaying?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't have the answer to that. So I guess it kind of depends on if you need the cash or not. You still get the benefit of doing that. That is that the money you donated to the charity, the distribution doesn't count as income to you. And you've effectively reduced your IRA a little bit by the amount you donated to charity, so that in future years, when you have to take money out, you'll have a smaller year-end balance on which you'll base your future distributions. I don't know. I don't have the answer on whether if it was donated to a charity, if you can still pay it back to the IRA. My assumption is you can. I don't know that it's really necessary, because it's not a taxable event for you anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you. That answers all the questions about Secures and CARES Act. And I just wanted to, somebody asked a question that's kind of a big question that doesn't relate to those two, but we'll ask that one at the end. I don't want you to think we forgot about it, but we will ask that at the end.
All right, sounds good.
Because I know you have a lot to cover.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. So moving on to the heart of the presentation. We're going to, sorry, one of the screens is messing up here. Between how we interpret risk, our natural behavioral biases, and what we learned from families and experience, we're all a little weird about money. It's kind of what I've noticed across my client base, but it's one of those things where everybody's a little weird, but because we're all weird, it's kind of normal to be weird about how we interact with our money. It's not a whole lot different than you think you have weird family members or a weird family, and then you interact with another family and you realize, well, they're kind of weird too. It's just normal. We seem to forget that we are or are not consciously aware, but we invented money, and it's ubiquitous in everything that we do, woven into the fabric of our everyday life. Just about every decision we make, money has an interplay into that decision. Unfortunately, from what I've seen, many of us don't consciously focus on our relationship with money, and our behavior and reactions to money are the problem, not the money itself. We tend to be influenced by our natural physiology, which promotes this instinctual responses from our brain, or just the chemicals that are going on when there is fear or greed, that work against our best interest based on how we see risk. And over time, we develop biases that create incorrect conclusions, preventing us from making good decisions. And we learn what are called money scripts. This is what I relate to. It's our parents' fault. We learn these from family and sometimes handed down by generations and from our own personal experiences. So what I'm going to focus on a little bit here is I'm going to talk to you about understanding risk. What are some of those common behavioral biases? And what are some of those money scripts that we've learned from our families and past generations? So defining risk. When we develop a plan for a client, we look to understand their investment profile. Besides a discussion about their values, the vision for the future, and their purpose, what they want to do with their money, we look to understand how someone defines risk and how much return risk do we need to take for that person. They may need to take a lot of risk, but they may not be willing to take that risk. Their willingness to take the risk, is how emotionally comfortable a person is taking risk. Since it's an emotional reaction, it is therefore psychological, and it's best measured with a psychometric tool. And the one we use is called Phenometrica. I put that on the slide here in case you ever wanted to Google that. Phenometrica is a service that's provided to advisors only, and it's probably one of the best tests out there for measuring people's willingness to take risk. It's what's called a risk tolerance questionnaire, and it helps us advisor assess the investor's appetite for that risk. And we usually recommend taking this test when a life event has happened to someone. Maybe they lose a job, or there's a death in their family, or a divorce. And then also in a transitionary period that might be coming up. So someone who might be going from work to retirement will reassess their risk, their tolerance for risk. If those don't come about, we usually look to try and assess that willingness every 3 to 5 years. Because even though your willingness kind of remains pretty stagnant throughout your life, it does change some, especially during some of those more emotional events. The other aspect of risk is what's your ability to take risk, and then what are your perception of risk. Collectively, these determine the investor profile, which we determine how to invest. So if you don't mind, if you could please initiate the first poll, and I'll give you about 15 to 20 seconds. What I'd like you to do here is kind of get a sense of how each of you define risk. So it's either danger, uncertainty, opportunity, or thrill when the word risk in a financial context is used. Gail is. So Gail, can't see the poll results.
Oh, you don't see them? Okay, so we had 13% that said danger, 78% that said uncertainty, 9% that said opportunity, and 0% that said thrill.
So all of you are very much like my clients. Most people see risk as uncertainty. I don't think I've ever had anybody say it's a thrill, and I've only had a couple people say it's danger. So you very much fall in line with pretty majority of the population, at least from what we see. Here on this next slide is a cartoon I thought was kind of very apropos, with a person saying to the advisor, "I'm not interested in minimum risk. I want long-term gains without risk." I kind of hear that a lot, to tell you the truth. Most people see risk as uncertainty. And since most people see risk as uncertainty, this is typically indicative of someone who is what's called risk averse, someone who does not like the risk of losing money. When we see uncertainty or are risk averse, we seek safety. That's why in down markets, people want to go to cash or some type of low rate of return or savings account. versus taking risk on something like the stock, continuing to take risk on something that they perceive like the stock market that might have a much higher expected return. But we live in an uncertain world, and the problem is we crave that certainty. Unfortunately, it's not possible for us to create certainty, and the stock market is a perfect example of that. We can kind of get a certain amount of expectation on what the market will do, but we can't control that volatility. Risk is everywhere. We cannot escape it. However, we do get to choose the risk that we take. And whenever we make a decision, we're assessing the risk and making a choice. This is true in life and with our money. In addition to choosing the risk, we can mitigate risk by transferring it to someone else, but we can't eliminate it. A great example of that is life insurance. We're willing to exchange a small recurring annual payment to a life insurance company for potential future payout caused by an unexpected or early death of a breadwinner or a loved one. We transferred the risk of losing the breadwinner to the insurance company and took on the risk that the insurance company will be around to pay out the benefits. So we haven't eliminated that risk. We've just made a conscious decision to transfer the risk to someone else, and we feel more comfortable with that. The other aspect of risk that I mentioned was the ability to take risk. Now, this is more mathematical. Your ability to take risk depends on your income sources, so like pension, Social Security, work, any kind of type of work income, and then your other resources that are available, like investment accounts. And then how much are you drawing from those investment accounts? So if your income sources are $100,000 and you still need another 20,000, how much that 20,000's got to come out of your other resources, your investment account, and how much of an impact on it. That's a representative of your ability. So I'll show you a little example here. Here we have Sue and Joan. Both have the same annual spending, about $75,000 a year. However, Sue has 25,000 of other income. Maybe she only has Social Security. So she needs to draw $50,000 from her other resources. Well, her portfolio is worth $500,000. So if she draws 50,000 from her portfolio of 500,000, that's a 10% draw rate. So she has a very low ability to take risk. Joan, on the other hand, has other income sources of 70,000. Maybe she has Social Security and a pension. So she only needs to pull $5,000 from her other resources of $500,000, or about 1%. So she has a high ability to take risk. Now, Joan and Sue may have the same willingness to take risk, which may be low, but Joan has more of an ability to take risk because she's drawing less. Sue, this type of client, and we have these types of clients that are spending more than what they have necessarily in the way of resources. Most advisors would say, well, if you're drawing 10%, we need to be aggressive and take more risk so that you earn more than 10%. We actually take the opposite approach and basically say Sue has a low ability to take risk, so we're going to make a more conservative portfolio and try and make her portfolio last as long as possible because of her high draw rate. Because what happens is, if she has a lot of volatility in her portfolio and in 1 year she loses 20% and pulls out 10%, she's now down 30%, and it's much harder for her to get back to even or have a positive. So that type of volatility be more impactful on Sue. Where on Joan, that type of volatility wouldn't have the same kind of impact, so she could afford to take more risk there. So our next live poll equates to our final final part of risk. So if you could just please answer this question, that'd be great. And then Gail, if you could tell me when the poll's finished, that'd be great.
All right. So I will close it now and share it. Now, can you see that?
Kind of, yeah, it's a little small on my screen. Let me see if I can blow this up.
I can read it if you
Bear
like.
with it. Yeah, I'm having trouble seeing it on my screen. Unfortunately, it's kind of small. It looks like most people answered number 1.
57%. Mm-hmm.
And then number 4 was the second most.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Great, thank you. So actually, many of you did better than most of my clients when I ask them this question. You're correct. The media is our biggest source of competition, and it's how the impact the media has on how we perceive risk. What's our perception of risk at the time? And this impacts our behavior and our decision making. The problem is today there are more ways to get your news and more networks. There's Twitter, Facebook, Google, Instagram, CNBC, Fox News, Bloomberg, and then your local news. Then you have the radio. In addition to that, there's technology, and the amount of technology that is out there and allows us to have access to all this information. And then social networks, people sharing their opinions and their perceptions on social networks. All this risk perception heightens someone's perception of what's going on in the world, even if it's not necessarily accurate. And then tie into that markets and volatility. So what I see today is people are more sensitive to markets and volatility because of all this information they're getting. And in this particular case, more information from all these sources, the media, technology, social networks, isn't necessarily better. And what you have to keep in mind, James Hamilton, who did a study in 2004, kind of highlighted this, the media is not our friend. At that time, when he did the study, he saw a gradual decline over the preceding several decades in hard news content in favor of news that is story-worthy. Media needs to generate revenue, and they use advertising for that purpose. So the more eyeballs they have on their show, the more revenue they're going to get. So therefore, going to things that are more story or headlines or sensationalism helps them attract more eyeballs. We can't help it. It's almost like our nature. It's almost like when you drive by a car accident, you see it, you can't help but look at the car accident. This change has attributed to an increasing competitiveness of media, which increasingly depends on maintaining customers who are less interested in the depth of understanding and more interested in that headline. This next chart kind of highlights how that change has come about, how much time or minutes per day we spend on digital versus traditional media. And you can see just back in 2011, we were spending, the black line here represents traditional media, and the blue line is more digital. But even back in 2011, we were spending a lot of time on media, almost, what's that, about 667 minutes a day. But over time, we're spending more and more time on digital media and less time on traditional, but both of them are still trending much higher in 2020. We're almost spending close to over 800 minutes a day compared to 2011, when we were spending about 650. That's a lot of information to be getting and a lot to process and try and understand. This next slide is a great example, or excuse me, I want to show you a video that's a great example of how the media projects some of the worst days in the market. So let me just bring this up. So when you're listening to this video, listen to the words, the sounds, the colors used in this clip. It evokes fear. The media outlets really do not have our best interest in mind when it comes to finances. In addition, the level of insight is focused more on the sound bites than the in-depth research or analysis. They're trying to get you to watch their broadcast to increase viewership, and that's because fear sells.
Wall Street watched Washington with shock and fear.
Nobody could believe it.
As the bailout package went down on Capitol Hill, the Dow went down like a sub.
Markets suffering through a brutal week. The market in a search of hope, silver linings. Whatever they can find here is the questions. You know them as well as I do. The market at this moment down 100.
Jim Cramer is spot on. If you are a retail investor, don't touch the TV, but also don't touch your telephone and call your broker.
Financial freefall. The Dow plummeting 600 points.
What's going on in the stock market and the banks is a freight train.
A battered U.S. economy.
The need to tackle our deficits.
Leading an unstoppable global fear factor. Asian shares slammed. European markets pummeled. Oil down nearly 20% in a week. All triggering a rush to gold and America's downgraded debt.
Inside what really was an epic slide today.
Yeah,
Roberto.
you can't really put a good face on it. 6.66, yikes!
The stock market had its worst day of the year today. In fact, it's the biggest point loss since the day before Thanksgiving. New worries about the impact of the Greek debt crisis sent the Dow down more than 200 points, the first triple-digit loss in 45 trading days.
We are looking at another day of extreme volatility. Stocks opened just moments ago with the Dow down more than 600 points. And this week alone, stocks have now wiped out nearly $3.5 trillion in value.
Stocks, they fell hard again today. Economic fears and many unknowns rattling investors. The Dow falling another 1,300 points. It now closed below 20,000. The Dow is now down a mind-blowing 10,000 points from its all-time highs hit just last month. Let's put that in context. It took the Dow 103 years to first hit the 10,000 mark, and now we have lost 10,000 in fewer than 30 days.
Sorry about that. Trying to get rid of the video. So as you can see from that slide, or that video, pretty scary stuff there. This next slide kind of highlights what really happened in reality. This is one of our favorite charts that we use. On this chart, you'll see a lot of red dots. These red dots are the intraday low for the year on a rate of return. The blue line represents the rate of return.
Excuse me, Russ, we don't see your slide.
Okay.
So go to that drop down box and see if you can go back to screen.
How about now?
There you go. That's it.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. My technical skills aren't as good as my financial skills, I guess. So like I was saying, on this particular slide, the red dots here represent the intraday low for the year. The blue line represents the rate of return where the S&P ended up by the end of the year. So you see a lot of red dots, which is kind of indicative of the fact that every year we have some intraday low or some volatility. And taking into consideration some of the dates that were considered in that video, September 2008, the intraday low was minus 49%, but the market ended up minus 38% by the end of the year. Now that's not great. However, in 2009, the intraday low was minus 28%. But by December 31st, had you stayed invested, you would have, yes, you would have had this minus 28, but you would have been up by the end of the year, gone from minus 28 to up plus 23%. 2010, the intraday low was minus 16, yet it ended up plus 13 by the end of the year. 2011, minus 19 was the intraday low, but yet you ended up flat by the end of the year. 2012, minus 10 was the intraday low, but yet you ended up positive 13% by the end of the year. What this shows is that even though the media is reporting those horrible days, and each one I just mentioned, the market reacted differently. And by the end of the year, in most of those cases, if you stayed invested, you were you were showing positive returns. Here's another story that kind of highlights this. This is a headline from the New York Times that just came out this past July. It's important to remember news is reactive. They're reporting on what's already known in the markets. By the time the news comes out, the market has already anticipated that it was going to happen. So here on July 30th, this was a headline: a collapse that wiped out 5 years of growth with no bounce in sight. And this was the chart that accompanied it. They're showing this minus 9.5%. They're showing this 9.5% drop in GDP, and which was on an annualized minus 32.9%. Sounds pretty scary, but the market had already anticipated that. It had moved on. It's the surprises that markets do not like, the shocks or uncertainty. And one of the most recent surprises is a bat that gave the whole world a virus, right? That was not expected. And that's why what you saw in March happened. It's all that uncertainty that came about. Another example of the media's reactiveness is during March, our firm sold our clients' money markets accounts, which is actually an investment. A money market is an investment. It's not like a savings or a checking account. It's made up of underlying bonds and investments. And we sold those money market funds in March for our clients because what we saw, there were liquidity concerns. We were worried that 2020 would be like 2008, where money markets would close down and you wouldn't be able to get your money out because of lack of liquidity. Those liquidity concerns were not reported in the news, but we were seeing it in the trends. We could see liquidity drying up in the markets through our through the resources that we have. So it would have seemed strange to the average person. Why would we do this? Eventually, the federal government came in and helped shore up liquidity, which negated our original need to sell the money market. So it turned out we didn't need to do it, but we didn't know that. And it never became news. But there was this very, it was pretty scary during that time period, some of the things that we were seeing. To further add to this, this is a Bloomberg economist predictions for the second quarter. And at that, came out in May of 2020. And they predicted that the second quarter would be down 35%. And it was reported by New York Times, July 30th, it was down 32%. So the news was basically reacting to what was already predicted in May. And the market from May went up 15%. And a lot of that has to do with economists feeling that in the third quarter and fourth quarter and in 2021, things will get better. They're predicting there will be a vaccine, or that we will adapt to this new life and figure out ways to make money. The market is always forward looking. It's partly why it's at its current level. It's projecting 12 to 18 months and figuring that by 2021, we will have a stronger economy than what we have today. So here's another video I'd like to show you to give you some, this is how the media portrays market highs.
A day for the history books. The stock market on a rocket ride, blasting through a ceiling and closing at an all-time high.
This is the last trading session of the month. The Dow firmly on track for its fourth straight monthly gain, and I believe it's a 30th record of 2017, and it's up 19% since Election Day.
All right, it happened. The breaking news. Look at that number. The Dow Jones over 25,000. That is why we have CNN chief business correspondent, star of early star Christine Roman is here to tell us what's going on.
Well, it was just a month ago we hit 24,000. It was the end of November, 24,000. So just a month, the fastest 1,000 points in Dow history.
Happy Wednesday. Great start to the day. 2-1 advancing the declining stocks. China's still closed, but Europe is mostly to the upside. And folks, when you've got financials up, tech up, healthcare up, consumer discretionary up, that's what you want.
Oh, Russ, you're muted. And then just go back to the screen again, the drop down box to get your video.
There you go. Are we okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. So why is that important? Because I can't tell you how many times we get calls from clients saying that we're at an all-time high. Should we be doing something? Well, if you think back to watching that video, March 2013 was the first clip. And at that time, this is representative of where the S&P 500 was. By 2014, we were up 21%. The market is always at all-time highs. It really has nothing to do with the fundamentals. It's just a way for the media to project a soundbite and get you to watch. Here's another example from one of the clips, July 2017. This is where it was reporting the market was at an all-time high, but within a year, it was up another 13% by November, December of 2018, another all-time high. As a matter of fact,
I'm sorry, excuse me, Ross. Can you show your screen again? Is the video still on?
Sorry.
That's okay. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to handle on that end, I know.
All right, sorry about that. Let me go back then. So what I was trying to show you is here in 2013, this is when they projected an all-time high. By the end of within a year, we were back up to 21%, another all-time high. Here's one of the other clips. They were talking about July 2017. They were saying we're at an all-time high. By the end of November, December 2018, we were up 13%. And then more recently, in January 2018, they were talking about that all-time high. And we were up, here we are today, up 20%. And that's even with this drop-off that took place in March. So the point is, the media gives us a perception they're out there to get us to pay attention so that we'll focus on them, and it really doesn't have anything with us to do with our individual, us personally. So now I'd like to move on to behavioral biases. This is a question that will kind of highlight one of the more common behavioral biases. So Gail, if you could initiate the poll for this one, that'd be great.
Okay. We'll give it a few more seconds. The numbers are dancing around. We'll see.
All right.
I'll just wait like 3 more seconds and see what else happens, because it keeps moving. All right, so we're going to close the poll now. And then, so 65% would keep the stock, 13% would sell the stock at 20,000 and capture the profits, 22% would sell half to get their original investment back, and 0% say they would have sold it before it reached 20,000.
Awesome, thank you. Behavioral biases are principal behavioral finance. It's why our role as an advisor is really more about managing behavior than it is about managing money. It's the idea that we're all susceptible to certain biases when it comes to investing. These biases lend themselves to bad decision making. There are many biases that exist. On the next 2 slides, I highlighted a few of the most common ones we experience. The poll you just took highlights one that's called loss aversion. And if you answered question 2, 3, or 4, you show a bias called loss aversion. That's where we take
Ross, I'm sorry, we can't see your screen again. I don't know why. I'm sorry, I can't control it. Can't control it on my end here.
How about now?
Yeah, but we see your notes too.
I'm not sure why that is. Okay. How about now?
Okay, now we have it. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, so those of you that are out in the audience, I must apologize. I'm used to Zoom. This is my first time using GoToMoney, so sorry for the inconsistencies here. Anyway, if you answered question 2, 3, or 4, you show a bias called a loss reversion. That's the pain from a loss hurts more than the satisfaction felt from the same amount of a gain. So the pride in the gains, so when we sell early, the losses hurt more than that same amount of gain. It causes people to realize gains too early because we don't want, we want to feel good about what we've done, and we don't want to lose that gain. As the size of the loss looms bigger, the aversion becomes even greater. It's probably the biggest reason that most people will want to sell when markets are down versus buying at that time. Another one is recency bias. What has happened most recently is likely to continue. And you see this when markets go up maybe 30%, like they did in 2019, investors extrapolate that that will continue in perpetuity. It's also the same thing like what we saw in March of 2020. The market's going down, they want to get out, those losses, it's going to continue going down, they extrapolate that the markets are going to continue to go down. Another one, because I'm a big Eagles fan, I don't know if many of you are out there as Eagles fans, if you listen to sports talk radio, after an Eagles win, on a Sunday, the fans will call in and say, hey, we're going to the Super Bowl, because they extrapolate out that the Eagles are going to continue to win. The following Sunday, they might lose, and they're calling up and saying they need to fire the coach on Monday. That's an example of recency bias. Another one is anchoring. Anchoring is when you fixate on some point in time. So a great example of this is personal residence sales. A homeowner thinks their house is worth $350,000. The real estate agent suggests it's worth more like $400,000. The homeowner gets an offer for $350,000, and the homeowner thinks this is too low because they anchored on the fact that the real estate agent told them it was worth $400,000 when they were originally willing to take $350,000. Another example is when you buy XYZ stock for $30 per share, but now it's only worth $25. The investor is going to hold on to it until it comes back to $30. When the better decision might be to sell the stock at 25 or determine, is it better to hold it at 25 and keep it till it goes up? Or is it better to sell that stock and put it into something else that might go up faster? Because of anchoring, they tend to hold on to that type of position. And the last one in this slide is confirmation bias. This is where we're looking for information that confirms our own belief while ignoring anything that contradicts it. It's why programs like CNBC and Fox News are so successful. People who think they have answers and then read or hear a story to back it up is an example of confirmation bias. So they feel their answer is right because they heard or read a story that says the same thing. So this is our last poll. It's an example of one of the other biases. If you could initiate the poll for me, that'd be great.
Okay, done. Okay, this one's pretty consistent here. Okay, so we'll give it a few more seconds. They just changed. Okay, I'm going to give 3 more seconds and close it. Okay, so 73% said they would have kept the stock until today. 17% would have sold it when it doubled in value. 6% would have bought more at that time, and 4% said they would not have bought it in 2007.
So thank you very much. I appreciate that because you're kind of very many of you demonstrated our next bias is what's called hindsight bias. If you answered 2 or 4 on that last question, you show signs of hindsight bias. Excuse me, I'm sorry, if you answered questions 1, if you answered question 1, you would have shown signs of hindsight bias. People overestimate their knowledge at the time and become falsely overconfident in what they would have done. So if you think you would have kept the stock till today, my sense is that's because you associate that it's Apple And it's really hard at that time for someone to hold a stock that's priced at around $16 at that time, to hold the stock until it goes up to $400. Our natural inclination is to eventually, it goes back to that loss aversion, where we probably would have sold the stock way before it got up to where it was today. Another bias is called endowment bias, where we value our own assets differently than someone else who does not own the asset. This is very similar to anchoring. Personal residence, again, is a great example of this. Property owner will think their house is worth more than the market is willing to bear, even without any information to support their claim. For instance, person buys a home for $350,000. They put $100,000 worth of improvements into it. The market only thinks the home is worth $400,000. However, the homeowner is stuck on the fact that they effectively have $450,000 into it. They've kind of endowed that number into their head, and they think the house is worth more than what the rest of the market is telling them. And then the final bias here is herd mentality. That's where we follow others versus doing our own analysis. You see this a lot in the markets. Bitcoin is a great example of this. People want to buy it because everyone else is buying it. So finally, moving on to, it's our parents' fault, money scripts. Money scripts are money lessons we learn through observation or conversations with our family, which led to the creation of a financial comfort zone. They usually go unexamined and contribute to poor decisions and or limit our choices. They can be reinforced from prior generations also. Anyone who had a family member that went through the Depression as a young adult probably has been impacted and demonstrates it in their own money behavior. Personally, I still remember how my grandmother, who was pretty well off, used to buy dented cans at the supermarket because they were cheaper. You know, she might save 10 or 20 cents. And that's because of her experience in the Depression, which she passed down on to me. The fact that I remember this is still a subconscious impact on my own money behavior. You know, maybe I'm living too frugally. Some people think I'm cheap. I like to think frugal. And it can inhibit how I might enjoy my life because of that experience that I developed from those money scripts I took from my grandmother. So there's several kinds of money scripts. There's overt money scripts, covert money scripts, and then there's a concept that they're contextual. So an overt money script is formed by direct communication. It's something like, it's important to save. It's better to give than receive. You better take care of yourself first because nobody else is going to. Debt is bad. Covert money scripts are formed by observation, you know, observing people by how they are portrayed in the media. Maybe you see famous people and they seem wealthy, so you have this money worship that you develop over time. You want to have what they have. It also comes from like children observing how their parents discuss money, but are never really part of the discussion. They just kind of see their parents arguing about money or discussing it and not involving the children in part of it. You take on those money scripts from your parents. So what does it mean by money scripts are contextual? Oftentimes we apply money scripts in situations outside of their originating context. For example, someone who learned the money script, don't spend money except on necessities, could be a script formed by someone in poverty. They could only buy the necessities. If that person ends up getting out of poverty, the money script would no longer be necessary. Although this is case, this person may still abide by the money script without realizing it and not fully enjoying their lives. So what do? Unfortunately, I don't really have a magic solution. There's no silver bullets. It's really understanding yourself and controlling bad behavior have more to do with success than which investment you choose. When boiled down to the basics, success is built on how much you make, how much you save, how much you spend, and how much your money grows. And through our own behavior, we control 75% of those. And no one really has control how others perceive the value of our assets, the markets. You know, they're going to do what they're going to do, but you know how much you can save, spend, and make. Awareness of biases and money scripts is the first starting point, just knowing that they exist. So asking yourself some questions. And we go through this when we onboard clients, getting them to talk to us about their history with money. Ask yourself, what conversations did I have around money as a child? What still sticks with me today? How might it help? How might it hurt? What biases do I see in myself? When watching the news, keep in mind their objective is not necessarily in alignment with your goals. Be aware of what they're trying to do. Understanding where your money is spent and being purposeful on it and how you use it. There was a study done by Gallup in 2010 where 450,000 respondents participated, and it's called the happiness threshold. And what they found was spending above $75,000 a year does not really increase your happiness. Beyond 75,000 spending does not really improve our emotional well-being. It does marginally, but not as impactful as getting up to 75,000. Education is another way. I listed here a site called Khan Academy. It's a great site. They have short videos to show you how to invest, difference between stocks and bonds, what diversification means, things like that. They're 7 to 10 minutes long. It's free, but getting yourself educated. One thing that we do with clients is what's called bucket investing, and then that's tied into diversification and having faith in people that they want to have a better standard of living, that they want to improve their lives, and that over time our economies will grow. And bucket investing is the idea that if you need to draw a certain amount of money from your resources, say it's $10,000 a year from your portfolio, with bucket investing, you keep 2 years worth of withdrawals in cash, and then you keep up to 7 years worth of withdrawals in bond-like or little less risky investments in stock. So in cash, in my example with 10,000, you might have 20,000 in cash. In bonds, 7 times 10, you might have 70,000 in the bond side of your portfolio, and then the balance of your money in stock-related investments. And those years, like if keeping 7 years, you might keep 5 years if you want to take more risk, or more, or 8 or 9 or 10 years if you want to take less risk. But the idea is each year you revisit your portfolio, you draw out the money you need from the cash bucket, and then you refill the cash bucket with either the bond or the stock bucket, depending on which one did well in the prior year. If the stock or bond bucket didn't do well, then you just pull from cash and do nothing. That's a strategy that we'll use with some of our clients. Technology is another great way to control our behavior, automating as much as you can and making it simplistic. Automation could be something like making sure you rebalance your portfolio, setting that up so it happens on an automatic basis. Reinvesting dividends and capital gains, doing that automatically so you don't have to think about where you're going to put your money when those pay out, assuming you don't need to draw from that. You don't need to use that money for cash flow. And then finally, one thing we'll do with our clients is we'll replicate their paycheck. We'll send to their bank account a monthly amount, and then they'll use that for spending. We'll make it automatic so that they know what they can spend for the month, kind of creating those barriers and making things simpler for them. And then the final one I call the illusion of certainty. And this pertains to annuities. Annuities kind of have a bad rap. I used to sell annuities. We don't do it anymore, but I still use them as a tool to help my clients. Annuities aren't bad. It's the people that sell them that are bad. And today's annuities have advanced or evolved to quite a point where they can offer a very low-cost way to create a guaranteed income stream without having to give up a large amount of cash. And today's annuities allow you to draw from the annuity, and if you die before the annuity runs out of money, that money goes to your heirs. If you draw the annuity down to zero, then the annuity company picks up and continues those guaranteed payments to you for your life. So they've really evolved from where they were in the past. And what this does for you is it allows you to transfer the risks to the annuity company, where they use actuarial analysis to determine life expectancy, plus pool your money with other people. This allows them to make larger annual payouts on a given principal amount than what an investor could do on their own. It's a way to transfer risk to the annuity company. Now you're not taking risk, you're not taking risk. Now you're taking risk. The annuity company will be around to make your payments until your death, versus taking the risk on investing on your own. So there's still risk there. It's just transfer of risk. This is a trade-off for behavior. During down markets, you're very unlikely to hear about how an annuity company's doing, and not hearing that, not having that perception makes you feel safer, and therefore you're less likely to sell out of your other investments because you feel comfortable getting this guaranteed income stream. And it helps us to keep from making those bad decisions. I apologize again for some of the problems we had during this video, but now I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Russ. That was very, very interesting and very informative. And what you're saying about the subconscious beliefs really holds true. I know it has for me. And there was a great book, I don't know if you've ever read it, called The Secret of the Millionaire's Mind. And it was written by someone who talks about, he gives examples of how people hold themselves back with money based on what they've learned in the past. So I don't know if anybody's read that, but it's a really, really good book. And I just really appreciate taking the time to talk with us and everyone to take the time to listen. And we have a few questions, but because we're running a little bit past 12, I just want to go ahead and formally end it and then go back to the questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Just want to thank everybody for coming. And I want you to leave the webinar today. You'll receive like a quick 5-question survey, and we'd really appreciate your feedback because we're always trying to tailor these to make sure that they fit your needs. And also wanted to let you know that you will receive a follow-up email within 4 hours with a link to the recording of today's webinar. And so feel free to share it with other people if you'd like, or of course watch it again. And it'll also contain information about our next Vigor Wellness webinar, which will be on tackling your family history, about how to put your family history together, take all those photographs and documents and put them together. And we're doing it in September so people have time to create Christmas gifts if they're interested. So it's going to be held on Tuesday, September 22nd from 11 a.m. to noon. And you can also, of course, find recordings of our past wellness webinars on our website. So thank you again for attending. And now we're going to just answer the questions. I just wanted to let people know if they wanted to sign off. Okay, so someone had said, why does the stock market continue to rise when the economy is in such bad shape with job and business losses?
That's a great question, and that's because the market's forward-looking. Its expectation is things will turn around. Again, going back to the media, most of us are getting our information from news reports, and those news reports are reactive. They're not giving you the depth of what's going on. And part of what we believe the market's going up has to do with the likelihood there'll be a vaccine soon, and just even though it'll take a while for us to all get the vaccine, that relief that there is a solution will create a different air around people and how they interact. It's going to take a while to get the jobs back, but I think what you're kind of seeing is there's many areas of the economy that are doing really well that you're not really hearing from the news. I mean, my spouse is in the real estate market, and now, real estate's very localized, so maybe it's not doing well in New York City or some of the cities, but it's like on fire around here. I have several friends that are in the commercial building business, and they're busier than they've ever been. Service industries that are able to use technology are doing really well, and people are going through it is difficult, but we're learning to adapt to this new normal and figuring out how to make money. Some restaurants aren't doing well, others are doing better than they were before. But you don't really get that from the news because they're more focused on what the headlines, because they're appealing to our fear factor right now, and they're reacting to information. They're not really reporting on what's going on behind the scenes. And there's a lot really going on behind the scenes. Now, that could, if something different than what expected happens into the near future, then you'll see the markets react in a negative way. But right now, the markets expect that things will turn around within the next 12 to 18 months, and that's why it's kind of priced at where it is today. It's already discounted all the bad news that's out there at this point.
And then the last question kind of is it pigtails on that one. It is about the media. And somebody said they read an article in Time magazine predicting a major worldwide depression worsened in living memory due to the effects of the pandemic. So of course, I know that's what you were talking about, the media scaring us.
So I'm not sure what the question is.
Oh, it's like, what are your thoughts about, are we headed toward a major worldwide depression? Based on what you just answered, I would say no. But I guess they just read this in the media that we're supposed to be heading toward a major depression.
I can't really say with certainty one way or another on that. I do know that it's headline catching, and the Time magazine's a good magazine. It's just hard for us to grasp all the information and everything that's going on out there and try and ascertain what's going to happen. So what looks like right now is you have all this negative things in the news. You have unemployment. You have the potential that people are going to lose their homes. You have people maybe getting kicked out, renters. What's going to happen to those people? What's going to happen to the various industries that are impacted by this? But there's stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't see. That's kind of people are adapting solutions. So it's really predicting that there's going to be a depression. I think is a little too. It's too easy to say that given the information that's out right now, right? So I can't say that won't happen. I guess I'm a little optimistic. I believe in our perseverance and our resiliency as human beings, and hopefully that we'll get through this. So I'm not really sure how to answer that question because nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the future. But right now, what the markets are telling is us they don't project that. The market isn't projecting that right now, and the market's made up of all the world of individuals who all have that same information that you're talking about. Right?
Oh, absolutely. No, it seemed like a very good example of what you were talking about, how the media tries to scare us and influence us. Of course, nobody knows what's going to happen, but it has a crystal ball. But,
yeah, it gets you to buy Time magazine, that's for sure.
Oh, definitely. Definitely want to grab that one. Yes, absolutely. But that was the last question.
Okay,
that was the last question we have. So thank you so much, Russ. We really appreciate you. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to watch this. And I'll look for the recording. And please answer the 5-question survey. We'd really appreciate that. Hope everyone has a lovely day. All right, take care. Bye.